It's a freezing day in central Oregon, but not cold enough to keep Chris Boyce inside. He's known around these parts as the Falcon guy, but federal authorities know him better as a spy, prison escapee and a bank robber.
I saw a lot of killings, I saw a lot of blood, I stepped in blood and tracked it around down the tiers, and escaped, shot at, chased. It's a whole lot of bad memories to try and forget. I do see an occasional psychologist, and they're always trying to get you to plow that stuff back up, but I'd rather just leave it buried, you know.
Chris Boyce was arrested in 1977 for selling CIA documents to the Russians. He'd worked on the CIA's Pine Gap project in Australia, and at his trial claimed he turned renegade after witnessing US intelligence subversion of Australian politics. The details were suppressed and he spent almost 25 years in jail, 10 of those years in solitary. It takes more than a cold day now to keep him from flying his Falcons.
All right, buddy. Almost a quarter century, totally. I want you to go up today. A third of my life locked up. Part of the way I kept my mind in solitary was remembering back to all my hawks and falcons I flew as a kid. We're gonna have to get some rocks. We need rock. I would just mine each memory and live in memory and imagination. I never thought I'd be sitting on a point like this looking at a river. I thought it was over. I wanted you to come here and see this particular spot. I come here often, and this is just a very special place for me. This is my church. So
it's a calming place, and you were certainly an angry young guy.
You know, you're not so smart when you're 21 years old. You're not that wise. And yeah, I was mad as hell and full of myself and preposterous in a lot of ways, you know. Decided to start my own one-man war against Central Intelligence. What sense does that make, you know?
In this interview and in the days that follow, Chris Boyce reflects on the price he paid for his crimes.
I regret the banks I robbed. That was unconscionable.
The reasons he turned so savagely against the CIA and NSA.
But I wanted to cause damage. I thought that my government betrayed me long before I betrayed it.
And the central role that Australia played in tipping him into his one-man war.
I don't regret that I spoke about American deception of Australia, my job. I don't regret that I spoke about CIA interference in Australian labor unions. I don't regret that. I think these things were all things that needed to be said.
And today he says more about these issues than he was ever able to more than 3 decades ago.
I'm actually surprised they're letting us have this interview, that they let you in the country.
Boyce's life story was told in the 1985 espionage movie The Falcon and the Snowman.
We're going to get on the plane and get out of here.
It explores his relationship with his childhood friend Dalton Lee, a drug dealer who turned his skills to smuggling documents to the Soviet embassy in Mexico. Documents which Boyce had snuck out. Boyce, through his father's intelligence connections, had secured a job in the telex room at TRW, a CIA contractor supplying surveillance satellites for the Pine Gap facility in Central Australia.
I was brought up in a very conservative household, but then as I grew up, as I went through high school and started into college, we were going through the Vietnam War, which was obscene, and the assassinations and all the race riots.
When he joined the project, Chris Boyce was already developing a distaste for American intelligence agencies. But it was information he saw on Australia that turned him the most. But the trigger point seemed to be the Australian material.
Yes. one of the first things that the project security director, Rick Smith, ex-CIA guy, told me was that that part of my job was going to be deceiving Australians, in that there was an executive agreement between Australia and the United States to share all the information that was in Pine Gap, but that we were not in fact doing that. We had stopped doing that.
Pine Gap. It's the most important United States base in Australia. It's also the most secret. So sensitive, the US government officially refuses to even confirm its existence.
Pine Gap was the anchor for the main American satellite used for monitoring Russian and Chinese communications. Intercepted messages were transmitted to the secret facility south of Alice Springs. The intercepts were then forwarded to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, and to Boyce's company, TRW, in California.
We actually operated the satellite from our facility. So my job would be to come in at the crack of dawn and open up the vault and go in and receive all the traffic from Langley, from around the hub, from Pine Gap, from Canberra, and I would decode it, print it up, and then I would distribute it to where it was supposed to go in the project, you know. And then
but Boyce was instructed to send only selected material to Australian counterparts who were meant to be in the loop.
This is going to be my job, deceiving Australia?
Chris Boyce joined the Pine Gap surveillance program in 1974, right in the middle of Gough Whitlam's time in government. Whitlam was decidedly cooler on the US alliance than his predecessors and was wary of the American spy base at Pine Gap.
Whitlam was viewed, you know, as like an Australian Ho Chi Minh. You know, he was like taking Australia to socialism. You couldn't say Whitlam's name without the spooks in there just looking nauseated. And he was a threat. He was viewed as a threat to the project. And when he started...
Oh, because he'd closed down Pine Gap, right?
Well, it hadn't actually been that he would. Yeah, that's what was feared.
So would they discuss that?
Yeah, that would be discussed at lunch in the Black Vault. You know, the latest people coming back from Pine Gap. You know, we'd be sitting around shooting the breeze. And but Whitlam was poking around Pine Gap, and he was even proposing not renewing the Pine Gap Treaty. And if he had done that, if that had happened, then America's eyes, in a strategic sense, would have been closed.
What Boyce saw and heard at TRW, monitoring the Pine Gap communications, has never been fully explained. The gist of it became well known from the movie's account.
Allow Union infiltrators?
But the details that came up in his 1977 trial were almost entirely suppressed. Government lawyers repeatedly and successfully objected whenever Boyce began to explain what he saw as CIA meddling in Australian affairs in 1974 and 5. When the Whitlam government was dismissed by Governor-General Sir John Kerr at the end of 1975, the Act confirmed to Boyce all that he'd been hearing about American infiltration of Australian politics. Tell me what happens the day of Whitlam's dismissal. What was the mood?
It was a party. It was jubilation. The Wicked Witch was dead. You know, he was gone. Everything, nothing more to worry about, and it was just a sense of relief, because they really did think that he was going to close it down. Yeah. That he was going to turn off our eyes, and they were worried. You know. And,
but is there anything to suggest that they were expressing more than mere opinion? Did you have suspicion that there was action being taken against his government? You know, destabilising.
Yes, I thought your Governor General, when he finally pulled the plug on Whitlam, I thought he was a CIA, you know, flunky. You know, I thought, and he was greatly admired in the project. I mean, the CIA resident there, Joe Harrison, was walking around calling him our man Kerr, you know, and I'm like, great, you know. To me, that was a coup. You Australians can call it whatever you want, but I cannot sit here and prove it, but I believe it.
And who was saying that?
Joe Harrison, the CIA resident agent for the project. He worked CIA in the project. I mean, everyone, half the people there were ex-CIA. He was actually
actual CIA.
The resident.
How did you react to that? How did others react to that?
Well, I didn't even consider Australia an independent, you know, like an autonomous Alaska now.
After the Whitlam dismissal, Boyce's leaking of US intelligence material reached chaotic levels.
And I couldn't think of anything that would more annoy them, that would be just cause them to choke, than to take their NSA codes and get them to the Soviets.
The end came swiftly when he was arrested in 1977. Staring down a 40-year jail term, Boyce escaped in 1980 from Lompoc Penitentiary, where he survived in the Idaho mountain ranges, with bank-robbing forays in between for almost 2 years.
I'm not a professional spy, and I'm not a professional anything. I'm an amateur at everything I do, or else I wouldn't be here right now, sitting here in this prison.
Soon after his recapture, 60 Minutes and Ray Martin secured the only interview with him from prison in 1982.
What you did has been described as the greatest security breach in decades.
Serves them right.
Serves them right.
It's my feeling on it. I have no regrets.
The door was firmly shut after this interview.
Did you want to be a martyr?
I thought it was a unique way to express myself.
And Boyce wouldn't be heard from again for decades. Since his release in 2003, Chris Boyce has lived until very recently in virtual anonymity with his wife Kate.
That's what I have.
Kate Boyce is a paralegal who, in the 1990s, took on the seemingly hopeless case of getting Chris Boyce released from what had grown after his escape into a 65-year sentence.
I got out through the love of a woman. My wife, who is a parole rep, she got me out of prison. She literally talked me out of prison. I would feel sorry for the parole reps because she just wouldn't give up. And the woman eventually saved my life. And I finally had a life back, and I just wanted it to be, you know, quiet and peaceful. But my wife wanted to tell the story, and I agreed that that's a good thing.
Did I tell you that my wife is thinking about opening a...
Kate, Chris and author Vince Font have just written a book, American Sons, The Untold Story of the Falcon and the Snowman, about the decade-long struggle to get Boyce and his fellow accused, Dalton Lee, released.
I had a constant belief that I would get him out. Did I think I was going to marry him? Well, heck no. I wasn't going to marry anybody.
After his release, Boyce and Kate retreated into small-town America, where she continues with her legal practice.
I think it's been pretty good. We haven't been shunned. There are no burning pitchforks in my front lawn, which I'm pretty happy about. Yeah. You know, I sort of at one point expected that. But I don't know, I think we've been treated very well, very well.
Since he's got out, what has been the key to his personal rehabilitation?
Falconry.
So the Falcons aren't a Hollywood invention. They're
absolutely real. I know. I live with them 24/7. There's blood in my kitchen. You know, it just never fails. He comes in and he's got blood all over him, and it's just disgusting.
Stop it. Put your foot down. I started flying Falcons when I was 12, and flew them until, you know, they came and got, the FBI came and got me. I think I was 21, and what I did was I reached back into every memory. The more I concentrated on falconry, the more I thought about it. It's almost like I have reached an ability to recollect every flight that my hawks and falcons ever flew. You know,
Today, most of Boyce's time is spent with his falcons, more often than not with this one bird, Higher Power, who has spent almost its entire life in a small cage.
He was in a breeding project and he was 6 years old, and he'd never flown farther than 10 feet. And I just got him going, got him started. You know, they just wanted to get rid of him, and I said, oh, wait a minute, he's a gerfalcon, I'll take him. And I started training him, started teaching him things, and just kind of brought him out here like this, let him get air under his wings, let him fly. There you go, come here. There you go.
If he wanted duck dinners,
Atta boy, get up there.
Boyce could get a better hunting bird than this.
See,
okay.
This is, I knew he would. Here, put it on him, here he goes.
But he's persevered in getting Higher Power into the air.
See how he turns on us?
Yeah.
And mounts up above us?
Yeah. So he just keeps circling you, right?
Yes. He thinks I'm going to flush something or throw out a lure.
Teaching him to chase ducks on a good day, but more likely to swoop on a lure.
Come on, here you go. There you go. How was that?
That's cool.
Did you have a good flight? It wasn't his wings that needed fixing, it was his head, it was his mind. He had to get his mind right that he was a gerfalcon, and eventually he did it to where he's become. I'll go there.
It's got to occur to you, he was in solitary for all his life.
He
right?
was in solitary like I was for 10 years, actually. His whole life. He'd never flown. Kind of broke my heart seeing him sitting there, and I don't know what they would have done to him, put him in a zoo or something, you know. And I wanted to let him come out and fly, and so, and to be honest with you, healing his mind did a lot to healing mine, actually. So, more pals, huh? So you've pulled 4 bobcats off this cliff edge?
Yeah.
Have you?
Clinton Rann, a fellow falconer, is one of Boyce's few human pals.
So what are you getting for a bobcat?
$800 to $1,000.
Not bad for a walk in the woods, huh?
Today, they're checking Clinton's trap lines.
Well, when I was a kid, I seen his movie and inspired me about falconry. And that's how I got into falconry, is I saw Falcon and the Snowman, and I thought that was really cool. I didn't know anything about what the story was about, you know, just here's a guy with birds. That's, yeah, so cool. And then when I heard that he lived here, I was like, well, you know, go meet this guy. I mean, a guy's done his time, he's paid his debt to society, and, you know, that's how I feel. I mean, there are some people that, you know, look at it as traitor or, you know, what it is, but 90% of the people that I've ever come across really don't have a bad thing to say.
There are limits to how much Chris Boyce wants to talk about the intelligence material after all these years. The consequences are still high.
I'm just not going to bang my head against walls anymore. Doing this interview is about as far as I'm going to stick my neck out. My problem is that if I'm convicted of anything, I go back to prison forever. You know, so I tiptoe through life.
But issues concerning Australia still clearly rile him.
Sometimes I would be really mad at Australians, you know. Here you were our allies, and we were screwing you.
Were you disappointed that there wasn't more of a reaction in Australia as to what you had to say about the material you'd seen?
I was really suspicious of the reaction in Australia, actually. Because I remember the head of your labor unions, Bob Hawke, immediately after, in the middle of my trial, get up, and I remember it was the article was brought to me that Bob Hawke had denied that there was any CIA interference in your labor unions. And I immediately assumed that man was corrupted, and then when he was elected prime minister, I was mortified.
Boyce's view of Bob Hawke is not based on inside information, but is a response to Hawke challenging Boyce's portrayal of Australian trade unions, a subject matter that still agitates him after all these years.
You don't seem to stand up for your own independence, it seems to me. And that bothered me.
The Whitlam government wasn't just beset by conservatives and the forces of capital. The trade unions caused enormous damage and instability to his government, possibly with sinister motives, if Chris Boyce's suspicions are correct.
Well, I was sitting there one day in the vault, and I received a Twix. And I had previously sent an inquiry for some of the project managers that had dealt with the shipment of our hardware and software and personnel to Pine Gap and shipment from Pine Gap back. And there were threatened strikes that we had heard about. And so we were asking for clarification instructions. Should we go ahead and ship? Is a strike imminent? Yeah. And the message that came back was, continue to ship as scheduled, the strike will be suppressed. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, not only are Whitlam's days numbered, not only is he going, but we've also infiltrated and corrupted, CIA has, Australian labor unions, The strikes were supposed to follow, and so somehow they didn't.
So you had a green pass, basically. If to get through Australia, you could get through strikes, airports, yes. Docks.
In that instance.
Trucking or whatever it was,
yes.
Your gear was safe. That was what your understanding.
Completely.
It's a very serious allegation. At any time, did members of the Australian government or the opposition ask you for details about that
Never.
Allegation?
Never.
Did that disappoint you? Did it surprise you?
Yes. It was like you didn't want to know. Well, you already knew.
Chris Boyce's days of talking about Australian issues are largely behind him.
We'll take his hood off, and we'll go over here and we'll start to approach the pond.
He's got more important missions with higher power.
But we'll go over there, get away from him. I'm a 60-year-old geezer now, yeah. And that's the past for me. That's other people can do that. Come on, Jerkin, get up. And I'm going to fly my Falcons and run my dogs and fish. Come on, take off. I wasn't necessarily out to help Australia. I didn't think Australians were helping themselves, actually. I just wanted to gouge CIA and do the most damaging thing to them that I could. I hate to say it, Mark, but he's awful fat.
Too fed, too well fed. He's just sitting there watching us.
He's like put away for the season. I loathed the surveillance state. I still do.
A more pressing problem for Boyce today is getting higher power into the air.
It might get his interest up if he sees the ducks take off the pond, right?
And he might go up the next time.
Okay.
Or we might have to wait about 2 days.
The only hope is to get a flock of ducks into flight. Ho!
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to work.
He seems quite happy.
Yeah, he's not.
At 61, Chris Boyce carries his regrets heavily. The cost to his family and father, to himself, to the victims of his bank robberies. But he carries almost no regrets for what he sees as striking a blow against the invasive nature of his country's intelligence agencies. A problem even bigger now than it was then.
Our civil liberties are being trashed, and I'm really glad that Snowden and Manning have released these things. I think I think Snowden's a very brave man. I think he's kind of a hero, and the volume of things that he's revealed, it just astounds me. I mean, I could only take out as much as I could put in a potted plant. You know, he downloads hundreds of thousands of documents.
And it seems that your views about the intelligence agencies hasn't changed.
No.
You're still like the angry young man you were on that issue.
Yes, I'm very pessimistic about it. I don't think anything's going to stop it. You know, it's almost like the enemy are the people themselves. You know, it'll, like the movie, it'll be the tail that wags the dog, and I think it already is. If I was going to tell Snowden something, I would tell him that they will never stop trying to get their hands on him. They will relentlessly pursue him. And when they get him, they're going to do to him exactly what they did to me. They're just going to grind him down. It took off faster the other day. They're after you, and they'll never stop looking. They'll never stop coming after you. So that all the rest of the people that think like Snowden, come on, he's going up. The surveillance state wants those people to live in fear. So that they want people afraid so that they don't do what Snowden did. Boy, get up there. See it? Come on, he got him. I'm going to go there fast. You come along at a pace you can do. But, you know, I think there'll be another Snowden. I think that it's just a matter of time. Somebody else will, for whatever reasons, will, you know, step forward. Look how far we are from our truck. Attaboy. Yeah, he can still fly pretty good. If there's any hope to control the surveillance state, that's it. Because certainly Congress is never going to make any meaningful reform. I just don't believe it. Even an old 6-year-old gerfalcon that's been locked up in cages all his life can realize his potential. Attaboy. Oy.